Welcome back to Made Up History to Fall Asleep to. Whether you're here to drift into a dream or simply let your mind wander gently through the past, I'm glad you've joined us. Tonight's tale is a reimagining of a moment whispered through legend, the fall of Troy. But we're not just peeking at it from the gates. Tonight, we slip inside the wooden beast itself, beside the warriors, into the shadows, where something went wrong. Inside the horse, one man hides a secret. This is the traitor in the Trojan horse. Theron was not born for legend. He was the fifth son of a minor Spartan noble, a boy of long silences and quiet eyes, a child who preferred watching hawks above the vineyard to learning how to scream his name before a spear thrust. His brothers marched, wrestled, shouted. Theron watched, not out of fear, but calculation. He'd learned early that silence made people careless. When no one thought you mattered, you heard more than you should. And Theron always listened. He studied the way oil burned in clay lamps, how horses paced before rain, how generals tapped their fingers when they lied. His mother called him clever. His father called him strange. Neither said it with much warmth, and so, by 16, Theron had taught himself to be invisible, not because he wished to hide, but because there was power in being forgotten. When war erupted with Troy, Theron was not summoned. He was not strong, not fearsome, not proud, but he volunteered. He said little when questioned. He simply pointed out he could read maps, draw precise copies, and remember orders word for word. Odysseus took notice, not because of strength, but because of the way Theron looked directly at him, unblinking, as if already knowing what he would ask. That unnerved the Ithacan king, and he liked being unnerved, so he sent Theron with the scouts. Theron spent most of the war far from the front lines. He read intercepted letters, learned dialects, watched Trojan supply lines from rocky hills. He delivered coded messages between captains. No one suspected. He saw more than they said. He walked like a servant and listened like a god. Now, 10 years in, he was deep within the last gamble of the war. A wooden horse pulled into the heart of Troy. A gift, forged with cunning. 30 warriors, handpicked by Odysseus himself, crouched in the horse's belly. Among them, Theron, not the strongest, but the quietest. Odysseus had insisted. The air inside the horse was thick and bitter. The wood creaked gently, swaying with movement below as the Trojans pulled their gift across stone. Dust floated. No one spoke. Each breath was measured. Knees pressed against ribs. A helmet clinked softly. Outside, Troy celebrated, unaware of the trap they welcomed. Theron closed his eyes and listened. Beyond the walls of the horse, he heard footsteps echo on marble. Laughter. The strained wheels dragging them through a courtyard. The barking of a dog. The high voice of a child shouting, "Look! It has eyes." And then, the thump of the horse being settled into place. They had entered Troy. Theron opened his eyes. It was pitch black. No one dared light a torch. The warriors sat still, armor gleaming dully in the little cracks of moonlight. The plan was simple. Wait until night fully fell, until the city slept, then emerge silently, strike fast, open the gates, and end the war. But something shifted. A breath, sudden and sharp, a hand on his shoulder. Theron turned his head. He recognized Cleon by the outline of his hair, curly, still thick with sea salt from days ago. Cleon's whisper was barely sound. "Theron," he said, "Demas is dead." Theron's blood slowed. "What?" I felt for his pulse. He's cold. There's no wound. He didn't cry out. Theron moved forward carefully. The men shifted as he passed. He found Demas slumped forward, chin resting on his chest, one eye slightly open, dead, but unmarked. No bruising, no sign of struggle. In this cramped silence, among the best warriors in Greece, someone had killed without a sound. The mission could not fail, but now, one of their own was gone before it even began. Theron pressed a hand to Demas's chest. No breath. He motioned to Cleon to stay silent and retreat. They couldn't afford panic. Not yet. He sat back in his place, mind racing. Demas was known for discipline, for faithfulness to Odysseus. If someone had silenced him, it wasn't a mistake. It was a message. Theron thought of the timing. Demas had been closest to the door, first to emerge when it opened. A leader in the strike. Had someone wanted him out of the way? But why? Unless... Theron's mind chilled. Unless the horse held more than soldiers. Unless someone among them didn't want Troy to fall. He remembered Odysseus's list. The names handpicked. Warriors from different city-states. Some barely knew each other. Unity had always been fragile. Pride, stronger than loyalty. Could a Trojan sympathizer have been planted? Or worse, one of their own turned? Theron kept his face still, his breath slow, but every sense inside him sharpened. Someone in the dark was waiting, watching, and now Theron was the only one who knew. And so the fall of Troy balanced not on spears or swords, but on a whisper, a shadow, and a boy no one had noticed, until now. Theron sat motionless, his back pressed against the rough wood of the horse's inner frame, the scent of pitch and sweat thick in the stale air. Around him the others waited, some dozing in brief spurts, others rigid with anticipation. Outside, Troy's revelry swelled like a tide, distant music, clinking goblets, laughter tinged with wine. Inside, time slowed. A man was dead, and only Theron knew it wasn't an accident. He let his eyes adjust to the limited light, trickling through the slits in the wood. He traced the outline of each man in his mind, where they sat, how they breathed. He remembered Demas's last meal, a hard crust of bread, nothing poisoned, or they'd all be feeling it. No wound, no noise, just gone. Theron thought back to the quiet weeks leading up to this mission. He recalled a strange moment, a brief meeting in the supply tent. A low-ranking soldier, Makar, had spoken too familiarly to one of the captains. Odysseus had brushed it off, but Theron had seen something else. A flicker of familiarity, as if Makar had been among them longer than his file suggested. But Makar wasn't in the horse. He hadn't made the list. Unless he had. Theron twisted slowly in the cramped space, careful not to touch armor or knock steel. He studied the face nearest him. Æson, a gruff Theban with scars across his cheeks, sleeping. Next to him, Lycos, tall, quiet, perpetually sharpening his blade. Awake, watching Theron, too alert. Theron averted his gaze and replayed the memory of entering the horse. He had counted 30 men, no more, no less. But Odysseus had checked the list alone. The names were never read aloud. The assumption was trust, a fool's assumption. He began to form a plan. He needed to isolate the threat without giving himself away. If the traitor knew Theron suspected, he'd strike again. From his belt pouch, Theron withdrew a small strip of linen, torn from a standard. He dipped it in olive oil before boarding. Quietly, he pressed it into a narrow seam in the wooden wall near his shoulder, then flicked a shard of flint to spark it, just enough to smoke. The trick was old. Create a reason to shift positions without alerting anyone. As thin grey tendrils began to rise, men around him stirred. "Smoke," whispered a voice. "Is something burning?" Theron coughed, just enough to sell it. Another voice grumbled, "We can't be discovered. Put it out." "I think it's in the wall," Theron said quietly. "Could be a torch, left near the outside." Odysseus's second-in-command, Menon, hissed, "Switch places." Theron, take the center. Lycos, help him. Perfect. As Theron crawled to the horse's core, he passed close to Lycos, who didn't blink, just followed orders. In the narrow belly of the horse, pressed between armor and oiled shields, he finally reached a tight space, with more room to breathe. From here, he had sightlines to everyone. He counted again. 29 men, one body. No motion near Damar, no effort to explain it. Maybe they hadn't noticed, or maybe they had, and were waiting. Time passed. Troy quieted outside. The stars climbed above the city, and the palace fires dimmed. It was nearly time. Then a whisper reached Theron, from the shadows behind him. "Clever." He turned, slowly. A figure shifted forward, small, wiry, face obscured. "Did you enjoy your little smoke play?" the voice asked. Theron recognized it. Not Makar. Worse. Erinos. Erinos was one of Odysseus's veterans. Quiet, serious, loyal. Or so everyone believed. But now he smiled with something colder than betrayal. "You're good," Erinos said. "Too good for this war." Theron didn't move. "You killed Demas?" Erinos nodded. "He asked too many questions, just like you." Theron steadied his voice. "You're Trojan?" A shrug. "What's a Trojan or a Greek when gods no longer speak? I follow reason. The Trojans offered peace. Odysseus wanted glory. You sold us out." Erinos' smile faded. "I prevented another decade of boys dying on beaches. You think sacking Troy will end this war? It'll feed the next." "You murdered a friend," Theron said, voice low. Erinos leaned in. "I stopped a blade from being thrust into a child's heart." Theron's pulse raced. They were surrounded by men who'd kill Erinos for treason. But one wrong word, and Erinos would strike again, perhaps even slit Theron's throat before another breath could be drawn. So Theron said, "Then help me." Erinos blinked. "If you want to stop the bloodshed," Theron said carefully, "then let's open the gates for parley, not slaughter." "That's not how this works," Erinos said. "It could," Theron replied. "But not if you keep killing allies." Erinos watched him for a long time. Then he said, "Midnight, when they light the western torch. I'll act. Keep your mouth shut and you'll walk out alive." And with that, he vanished into the dark. Theron leaned back, heart thudding. He now knew who the traitor was. But was he the only one? Outside, a hush fell over Troy. The final stage had begun, and Theron, once invisible, was now the only thread holding both loyalty and treachery inside a wooden belly. Theron kept still, his breath shallow. He felt every heartbeat, every creak of timber, every shift in the shadows as the men of Greece lay silently packed inside the hollow beast. The traitor had a face now, Erinos, and a plan. Act at midnight. But what plan? Open the horse early? Let the Trojans burn them alive? Or something worse, something that betrayed both sides? He needed to warn Odysseus. But the moment he whispered Erinos' name, Theron risked being accused himself. Suspicion moved faster than truth in war. And here, in this suffocating womb of deception, even allies watched each other like wolves. He moved slightly, just enough to glance toward the front. Odysseus was crouched, unmoving, one hand resting on the carved inner beam for balance. His eyes were shut, but Theron knew he wasn't asleep. No one truly slept in here. A faint scuffle to his right. Someone repositioning. Was it Eranos again? Or another restless warrior? The wood groaned slightly above them as Troy's sentries, unaware of their deadly cargo, patrolled below. Outside, music had faded into occasional laughter. Drunken, victorious and vulnerable. The night deepened. The moment approached. Then a faint glimmer. Torchlight. Through a carved slit in the wood, Theron saw it flicker atop a tower on the western side. Midnight. Would Eranos strike now? Nothing happened. Not yet. Then a whisper. He's not where he should be. It was Lycos. Theron recognized his voice, low, tight with worry. Who? Another voice asked. Eranos. His post was rear left. He's not there. Theron didn't speak. Not yet. He's probably relieving himself in a corner, Menon muttered. No, said Lycos. He moved before the signal, before midnight. That was too close to truth. Theron knew if he waited, if he said nothing, someone else would die. So he leaned forward slightly and whispered, He killed Demas. A pause. Then the air shifted, tension tightening like a drawn bow. What? Odysseus' voice cut through the shadows, sharp as a blade. Theron kept his tone steady. I saw the body. No wounds, no blood. But Eranos was near, too near. And he approached me just now. Said he'd act at midnight. Why didn't you say something? Menon hissed. Because he said he'd kill again. If he knows we're onto him... A loud thud. Someone had lunged. A scuffle. Then the unmistakable ring of a blade unsheathing. Silence! Odysseus barked. The noise stopped, but the damage was done. We find him now, Menon growled. Torches flickered outside, more than before. Had the noise drawn attention? Theron froze. From the rear of the horse came a quiet, metallic click. A latch being drawn? Then another sound, horrible in its timing. A Trojan boy's voice outside, slurred from wine. Father, the horse just moved. Inside, panic. Steady, Odysseus whispered. No sound, not one. But it was too late. Someone outside was shouting now. The wheel, it turned. A jolt ran through the horse as someone pushed against it. Back away from it, a guard shouted in Trojan. Torches surrounded them now. And inside, men began to sweat not from heat, but from fear. Eranos had made his move. Theron crawled toward the back. If Eranos had opened a panel, a sudden gust of cooler air hit his face. Yes, a rear plank had been shifted, just slightly, enough to look out or to whisper. Theron reached it, and Eranos was there, crouched, not escaping but watching. I told you not to say anything, Eranos hissed. I told them the truth, Theron replied. You're endangering the entire mission. The mission is madness, Eranos snapped. They'll slaughter the children, burn their temples, rape and raise. And you think handing us over prevents that? I think letting Troy see our face before they die changes history. Theron understood now. Eranos wasn't simply a traitor. He was a zealot, believing he could rewrite war with principle. We could still win, Theron said quietly, and not lose our soul. Eranos shook his head. It's too late. And then, without another word, he slipped through the gap. Gone. Theron lunged, but the plank slammed shut behind him. No time to shout. Odysseus, he whispered urgently. He's outside. He's exposing us. Then we go now, Odysseus growled. Sound the owl's cry. Menon reached into his tunic and released the wooden owl whistle. A quiet call, but one every hidden Greek would know. From the horse's belly, a sharp trill echoed. Outside, the world changed. Torches were thrown down. Footsteps scattered. Shouts rang across the stone, and inside, every man grabbed his blade. "We kill fast," Odysseus said, "and we open the gates." Theron reached for his sword, but his eyes stayed on the panel Eranos had slipped through. Would he betray them all? Or, at the last moment, would the man who killed his brotherhood stand against the very city he'd tried to save? The gates of Troy were still closed, and the wooden belly had begun to stir. Theron's heart pounded as he pressed his ear to the wooden wall. Outside, chaos brewed in the dark. He could hear guards shouting to each other across the courtyards, panicked voices trying to make sense of what had just happened. The great horse had shifted. Something was wrong. The victory celebration was cracking at the edges. Inside, Odysseus whispered sharp commands. "We go in 2 waves. Menon takes the first. Clear the courtyard. Theron, with me. We go for the gates." Theron nodded, though doubt gnawed at him. Eranos was out there. What would he do? Warn the guards? Lead them straight to the horse? A hiss of air and the faint creak of the panel signaled Menon's escape route opening. One by one, the warriors slipped into the cool Troy night, blades drawn. Theron followed a moment later, crouched low, using the shadow of the horse's leg for cover. The courtyard was dim. More torches than usual, yes, but scattered and haphazard. Panic had not yet resolved into action. Bodies moved quickly, Menon's team fanning out, striking silently. A guard dropped with a gasp. Another stumbled, stunned before a blade met his throat. Theron sprinted beside Odysseus, across the flagstones, skirting fountains and abandoned goblets. A drum of footsteps echoed from the western tower. More guards incoming. They had only minutes, maybe less. The main gate rose in a towering arch ahead. 2 Trojan guards still stood at the base, dazed by wine, but alert enough to see the danger. Odysseus didn't hesitate. He lunged from the shadows, slicing one cleanly across the chest. Theron met the other, parrying a wild spear thrust and plunging his blade between the man's ribs. The guard collapsed, coughing blood. They reached the levers. "Ready!" Odysseus barked. "Now!" Theron yanked one iron lever downward with all his weight. The gate's mechanism groaned like an awakening titan, gears clicking into motion. The massive wooden doors trembled, then began to creak apart. Beyond them, moonlight shone on the plains where Greek forces waited, still as statues. If they had heard the signal, they would be charging already. A sudden sound behind him made Theron spin. It was Eranos, alone, unarmed, his hands raised. "I didn't betray you," he said softly, stepping into view. "I told no one. I opened no doors." Theron tightened his grip on his sword. "You vanished. I had to see it, to see Troy one last time. I needed to know if what we were about to do was justified. You murdered Damas." "I silenced him," Eranos whispered. "He wanted to run. Would have alerted the Trojans." Theron felt fury rise in him. "You still think you're righteous?" "I think we all lose something in war," Eranos replied, his voice shaking now. "I just didn't want to lose my soul. I came back, didn't I?" The gate was halfway open now. Screams echoed from within the city. Greek blades were flashing through alleyways, igniting storehouses, cutting down guards. "I can help," Eranos said. Odysseus stepped beside Theron, his eyes never leaving Eranos' face. "You're a dangerous man," Odysseus said. "You act with purpose but answer to no command but your own. That makes you either a leader or a traitor." Eranos held his gaze. "Then let me prove it. Give me the north tower. I'll light the beacon. Your men will know the city's taken. The Trojans will panic." Odysseus looked to Theron. It was his call now. Theron hesitated. Trusting Eranos could mean saving lives, or sacrificing them. But something in the man's eyes, worn, conflicted, haunted, reminded him of his own reflection in stolen water days before. "Go," Theron said, "but if I see you again and the beacon isn't lit, I'll gut you myself." Eranos nodded once and vanished into the shadows. Moments later, the gate creaked fully open, and then thunder. Greek forces surged through like a wave, armor gleaming silver in the moonlight, weapons raised high. They flooded into the sleeping city with precision, smashing into what remained of Troy's night watch. The plan was working. For now. Theron looked back one last time. The horse stood silently in the courtyard, forgotten by the chaos it birthed. The rebellion was underway, but war is never just a clash of swords. It is the battle for the soul of men, what they become in the pursuit of victory. And somewhere, above the fires and blood, and the cries of a city falling, a single question echoed in Theron's mind. Was the betrayal already done? The fires of Troy flared brighter, casting long shadows over crumbling walls and narrow streets now thick with smoke and confusion. The Greeks surged forward, relentless and furious, but the city was no longer the sleeping giant it had been. Every corner held whispered fears, and every shadow seemed to hide more than just fleeing citizens. Theron moved quickly through the chaos, following the path toward the northern tower where Eranos had promised to light the beacon. The scent of burning wood and the metallic tang of blood filled the air, yet a deeper unease gnawed at him. Eranos' words echoed in his mind. He had come back for a reason, something more than just guilt or loyalty. As Theron neared the tower's base, he spotted a flicker of torchlight moving stealthily along the battlements. He climbed swiftly, silently as the night, heart hammering with every step. The upper platform opened before him to reveal Eranos, standing alone, a torch held high, ready to ignite the signal fire. "Eranos," Theron whispered, voice low, "you kept your word." Eranos nodded grimly, eyes scanning the horizon as the torch's flame caught the dry kindling. "The beacon will blaze, the signal for all our hidden allies." Theron's gaze hardened. "But why did you come back? What are you really after?" Eranos' face twisted in a mixture of pain and defiance. "Because this war is not what it seems. There are forces at play, Theron, beyond blood and swords. The gods themselves twist our fates. I came to stop a greater betrayal." Before Theron could respond, a sudden noise shattered the night, a deep, guttural growl echoing through the tower walls. Both men spun toward the stairwell as heavy footsteps thundered upward. From the shadows emerged a massive figure, cloaked in tattered fur and bearing eyes that gleamed with an unnatural light. The creature's snarls were more than human, something twisted and primal. Theron's hand went to his sword, but Eranos raised a warning hand. "It's one of the cursed," Eranos said, "sent by the gods to punish traitors." The beast lunged, powerful and swift. Theron barely dodged the swipe of its claw, heart racing. Together, he and Eranos fought desperately, their blades flashing in the torchlight, steel meeting shadow. Finally, with a final strike from Theron's sword, the creature collapsed, letting out a terrible howl that faded into silence. The tower seemed to hold its breath. Panting, Eranos looked at Theron. "This is only the beginning. The true betrayal lies not within these walls, but far beyond. We must end it before Troy is lost forever." Theron swallowed hard, the weight of the night pressing down on him. The war, the betrayal, the gods' cruel games, all intertwined in a deadly dance. As the beacon blazed bright, signaling the city's fall, Theron realized the line between friend and foe had never been more blurred, and the true story was just beginning. The beacon's fiery glow stretched across the night sky, a warning and a summons that reverberated through the hearts of those loyal to Troy. From shadowed corners of the city, figures stirred, hidden allies who had awaited the signal to rise. But within the walls, doubt gnawed at Theron, a creeping shadow beneath the roar of battle and the crackle of flames. He and Eranos descended from the tower, slipping through narrow alleyways where whispers of the approaching enemy mixed with the cries of the wounded. The city, once proud and vibrant, now felt like a tomb waiting to close. "Tell me," Theron demanded as they moved swiftly, "what betrayal are you speaking of? What god's game are we caught in?" Eranos' eyes flickered with pain and urgency. Not gods, but mortals. Men who use gods' names to mask their ambition. There's a faction within the Greek camp, Theron, one that plans not just to end Troy's reign, but to seize power over all of Hellas. The horse was a trick, yes, but inside it hides more than soldiers. There's a traitor with us, feeding them our secrets, opening doors for destruction. Theron's mind raced back to the moments before the horse's gates had closed, to the tension in the air, the uneasy glances exchanged among the Greeks hidden inside. A traitor, one of their own. But who? "We must find them before they strike again," Eranos continued, voice low but fierce, "and stop this rebellion before it consumes us all." Suddenly, a cry pierced the air. From the distance, the gates of Troy trembled under the weight of the Greek assault. Steel clashed, screams echoed, and the final hours of the city were unfolding. Theron tightened his grip on his sword. "Then we have no time to waste." They moved towards the palace, the heart of the city, where the council had gathered to plan their last stand. But as they approached, a figure stepped from the shadows. A woman cloaked in midnight blue, eyes gleaming with secrets. "Theron," she said softly, "you seek the traitor, but beware. Sometimes the greatest danger lies closest to your heart." Before he could respond, she vanished into the maze of alleys, leaving Theron with a chilling question. Who could he trust when every friend might be a foe? The city burned around him, but within that blaze, a storm of deception brewed. The fate of Troy was no longer just a battle of swords and shields. It was a battle for truth, loyalty, and survival. And in the heart of it all, the traitor waited. The night grew darker, the flames casting grotesque shadows on the crumbling walls of Troy. Theron's heart pounded, not from the clashing of armies outside, but from the gnawing uncertainty within. The woman's words echoed relentlessly in his mind. "The greatest danger lies closest to your heart." How true those words felt now. As he navigated the winding streets, Theron's thoughts flickered to the man he once called Brother Kalen. They had trained together under the watchful eyes of the elders, their swords dancing in unison during long days of practice. But lately, Kalen's gaze had been distant, his loyalty blurred by secrets he refused to share. Theron had sensed a shift, but dismissed it, too hopeful to face the betrayal that now seemed inevitable. Theron found himself at the gates of the palace, where the remaining leaders of Troy gathered in frantic council. The air was thick with despair, yet also fierce determination. "Theron," King Priam greeted him, his voice weary but resolute. "The Greeks breached the walls, We must hold them for as long as possible, Your Majesty. Theron replied, There is more at play. A traitor walks among us, undermining our defenses. I fear the city will fall, not only by force, but from within. Murmurs rippled through the council chamber. Queen Hecuba's eyes filled with tears as she clasped her hands tightly. Who would do such a thing? Who would doom us all? Theron's gaze hardened. I suspect Kaelin. Gasps erupted, but Priam raised a hand for silence. If this is true, we must act quickly. The king entrusted Theron with a small band of loyal guards, tasking him with uncovering the traitor's identity before the city's fall became a certainty. Theron and his guards moved through the palace's dim corridors, tension hanging like a shroud. Every whisper, every shadow could conceal betrayal. As they passed the great hall, a soft sound caught Theron's attention. A faint muttering, words too low to hear clearly. He signaled his men to hold back and crept closer, heart pounding. Behind a heavy tapestry, two figures conferred in hushed tones. One was unmistakably Kaelin, the other, a Greek officer, concealed beneath a dark cloak. Theron's breath caught. This was the proof he needed. Kaelin's voice was sharp, laced with desperation. The city weakened. Soon the gates will open. The horse was only the beginning. The officer nodded. Your loyalty will be rewarded. Hellas will rise, and Troy will burn. But if you falter, Kaelin's eyes flickered with fear. I won't falter. Theron drew his sword, stepping into the light. Kaelin, it's over. Kaelin's face twisted in rage and betrayal. You don't understand, Theron. This is for a greater cause. Troy is doomed, but from its ashes, a new order will rise. Before Theron could react, Kaelin lunged forward. The clash of their blades rang out, a desperate fight amid the crumbling palace walls. Guards rushed in, subduing Kaelin and the Greek officer. As dawn crept over the horizon, Theron stood over the captured traitors, the weight of his city's fate heavy on his shoulders. The battle for Troy was more than just a war of armies. It was a war for souls. And in that fragile morning light, Theron vowed to protect his home, even as the shadows of betrayal lingered still. The city stirred under the first light of dawn, yet its streets felt colder, haunted by the knowledge that betrayal had taken root within its walls. Theron stood atop the palace battlements, staring out toward the horizon where the Greek camp still loomed, silent but threatening. His mind replayed the confrontation with Kaelin, the shock of betrayal cutting deeper than any wound from battle. He remembered their childhood, running through the olive groves beneath Mount Ida, dreaming of glory and honor. Kaelin had been like a brother, fierce and loyal, or so Theron had thought. Their bond had been forged through years of shared hardship and training, but cracks had begun to form when Kaelin started disappearing for nights at a time. Theron had suspected discontent, whispers of surrender or worse, but had never imagined treason. The arrest of Kaelin sent ripples through the city. Some saw it as a necessary blow, a harsh but vital act to preserve Troy. Others whispered doubts. Could there be more traitors? The Greek officer's words hinted at a conspiracy deeper than anyone could guess. Theron's resolve hardened. He would root out the darkness, no matter the cost. Yet, beneath his determination lay a growing fear. How much longer could Troy endure? The Greek forces, despite the ruse of the horse, were relentless. And now, the city's fate was tangled with the fragile threads of loyalty and deception. As the city prepared for the next assault, Theron sought counsel with the priestess Clymene, whose visions were said to pierce the veil of time. In the flickering candlelight of her sanctuary, she spoke of shadows rising and hearts divided. "You carry the weight of the city," she said, eyes closed. "But beware, Theron. Sometimes the greatest enemy is the one who stands beside you." Her words unsettled him, but also fueled his determination. Theron began assembling a secret circle of trusted warriors and citizens, those whose loyalty was unshakable. Together, they would watch the city's gates, listen for whispers, and prepare for the inevitable fall. Meanwhile, in the labyrinth beneath the city, the Greek prisoners, taken during skirmishes, murmured of strange sights. Figures moving in the darkness, eyes glowing like embers, shadows that seemed alive. The city's old myths stirred in the whispers, spirits, curses, and gods displeased. Theron remembered an old tale told by his grandfather, of the horse itself being more than wood and paint, but a vessel woven with ancient magic and cunning. Could the Greeks have used sorcery to infect Troy from within? Was the traitor merely a pawn in a larger game? With each passing hour, the line between friend and foe blurred. The city's walls held, but its heart trembled. Theron's own loyalty was tested as he struggled to trust even those closest to him. He thought of his family, his people, and the dream of a Troy that would rise from the ashes, not as a city of defeat, but as a legend. Night fell again, and with it came a chilling silence. Theron's gaze fell upon the great wooden horse still looming in the city square. Silent, imposing, a monument to deception and hope. Inside the horse, the Greek warriors stirred, unaware that their fate and that of Troy would soon be decided by a struggle not just of armies, but of hearts and wills. Inside the belly of the great wooden beast, silence reigned, thick, oppressive, and alive with tension. The Greek warriors had barely moved in hours. Muscles cramped, breath shallow, hearts pounding in rhythm, with the anxiety coursing through them. Odysseus crouched near the center, his hand resting on the hilt of his blade, his eyes fixed on the curve of the wooden slats above him. But his attention kept shifting to Theron, who sat alone in the shadows, gaze downcast. No one spoke, but the air between them was electric. Odysseus trusted Theron's loyalty had held, but trust was thinner than the pine planks surrounding them. Suddenly, there was movement, soft, deliberate. A Greek soldier, young and nervous, nudged Odysseus. "He's not asleep," the soldier whispered. He hasn't closed his eyes in hours. He's listening, watching." "Leave him," Odysseus murmured. "If he were to betray us, we'd already be dead." But doubt lingered. Everyone knew there had been a confrontation the night before. Words exchanged, threats made. The unity of their group had been wounded, and in such close quarters, suspicion festered. Theron, for his part, sat with his thoughts spinning. He had thought the confrontation with Kaelin had resolved something within him, had made his purpose clear. But as he sat in the hollow heart of this wooden deception, he couldn't silence the voice in his head that asked, "What if you're on the wrong side?" He thought of Andromache, of the children of Troy, of the temples and statues that had stood for generations. He imagined them all reduced to rubble, trampled beneath the sandals of Greek conquerors. "And I will have helped let them in." The faint sound of hooves echoed outside. Theron stiffened. It was likely a patrol, but the sound didn't fade. Instead, it grew louder, approaching the square. Within the horse, Odysseus tensed. He pressed his ear to the wood. "Riders," he whispered. "Maybe 3. Theron crawled forward silently. "I'll take a look," he mouthed. "No," Odysseus hissed. "Stay in position." But Theron didn't stop. He pressed his eye to a small crack in the wooden hull. Through the slit, he saw 3 Trojan guards circling the horse on horseback, torches in hand. One of them dismounted and began tapping on the wooden legs with the butt of his spear. "Sounds hollow," the soldier said. "Too hollow for a tribute." "Quiet," the commander snapped. "It's a gift. Sacred. You want to be the one who desecrates it?" They moved on, torches bobbing into the darkness, but the tension inside the horse tripled. If even one soldier found a weakness, if even one dared open the hatch early, it would all be over. That night, while the city above grew restless, inside the horse, a storm brewed. The Greek warriors grew agitated. A second argument broke out, this time between Theron and one of Menelaus's lieutenants, Diodoros, who accused Theron of attempting to signal the guards. "Maybe we should silence him now," Diodoros growled. "You want to slit the throat of the man who got us this far?" Odysseus barked, his voice dangerously low. "He's shaken. He's hesitating. He's dangerous." Theron stood slowly, his voice calm but cold. "I could have betrayed you 12 times over. I didn't. I've burned the last bridges behind me. There is no going back, for any of us." Diodoros looked unconvinced, but Odysseus intervened. "We wait. No blades, no blood." But the seeds of division were growing. If they made it through the night, they'd have to hold themselves together just long enough to open the gates. But what then? Could they still rely on one another when doubt had already taken root? Outside, Troy prepared for dawn. Priam had called a public festival to honor the gods for the supposed Greek surrender. Music floated through the streets. Wine flowed. Torches lit the night in celebration. And in the square, the wooden horse sat silent, towering over the city that had welcomed it with blind reverence. Theron, back in his corner, closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to pray. He whispered to the gods he wasn't sure believed in him anymore. "Let me do what must be done. Let me see it through. Let me carry the weight, even if it breaks me." The final night would be the longest of his life. The stars above Troy were beginning to dim when the signal came. From inside the wooden horse, the sound was barely audible, a faint clink of metal against stone, repeated 3 times, then silence. It was Epius, hiding in a nearby ruin, confirming that the city had passed the threshold of deep sleep. The gates were lightly guarded. The moment had come. Odysseus stirred first. His fingers found the latch above, and slowly, soundlessly, the belly of the horse creaked open. Cool night air spilled into the chamber like a blessing. One by one, the Greek warriors emerged from the shadows, dropping quietly onto the stone below, like phantoms. Theron was among the last to exit. As his boots met the marble, he looked up at the city around him. Troy was unguarded, vulnerable, trusting. The feast had lasted well into the night. Bonfires now reduced to embers, courtyards strewn with empty goblets and fallen garlands. Children and elders alike slept soundly, unaware of the death creeping through their streets. Silently, the Greeks split into groups. One headed for the main gate, another toward the tower of guards. Odysseus turned to Theron. "You know the palace better than anyone. Lead the 3rd unit, secure the royal quarters." Theron hesitated. "Do you trust me now?" Odysseus stared at him. "Number, but I trust what you fear. And that's good enough." With that they parted, each to their purpose. Theron led his group through narrow alleys and gardens, past silent statues and moonlit pools. Every step took him deeper into the city that had once been his home. Memories tugged at him, his father teaching him to fight in the courtyard, his sister stringing laurel garlands for the summer festival, Andromache laughing under the olive trees. But there was no laughter now, only shadows. At the palace gates, they met token resistance, 2 drowsy guards taken quickly and without a sound. The doors loomed before them, carved from cedar and gold. Theron raised his hand to signal the breach, but just before they entered, he paused. Something had shifted. A noise, too deliberate to be a dream, too soft to be a command, drifted from the upper balcony. Theron looked up. A figure, Kaelin, still alive, still here. The rebel Trojan had returned, and his eyes met Theron's with venom. "You should have finished me," Kaelin whispered. Theron drew his blade. "You shouldn't have come back." But Kaelin wasn't alone. From the shadows stepped a dozen Trojans, loyalists perhaps, or defectors alerted by Kaelin's earlier suspicions. Either way, they were armed, and they blocked the entrance to the royal quarters. Behind Theron, the Greeks readied for battle, and in the torchlight, the marble floors of Troy ran red again. The fight was brief, but brutal. Steel rang on steel. Arrows hissed past moonlight windows. Theron faced Kaelin alone in the heart of the palace. Their blades clashed in a blur of silver. Kaelin fought with the fury of a man betrayed, not just by an ally, but by fate itself. "You chose the wrong side, Theron," Kaelin growled. "You betrayed your blood." Theron struck low, parried high. "I chose to end the war. You chose to open the gates for murderers." They grappled, blades locking. Theron twisted, rolled, and with a final surge, drove his dagger into Kaelin's side. Kaelin gasped. "It was never about loyalty," Theron whispered. "It was about peace." Kaelin crumpled. Theron stood shaking, bloodied blade in hand, just as Odysseus arrived. "The gates are open," Odysseus said. "It's done." Flames were already rising across the city. Ships pulled into harbor, Greek soldiers pouring in. Troy at last had fallen, but as the sun rose, Theron felt no triumph. In the following days, he wandered the ruins. He avoided the looting, the celebrations. He helped those who survived. He buried the dead. When Menelaus declared victory, Theron didn't join the cheers. Instead, he climbed the hill outside the city, where wildflowers still grew. There he knelt and wept. He had ended a war, but he had also ended a city.